So we've logged into lawschool.tr.com, which is where you should be logging into, and this is the homepage. The main thing that I wanted to highlight on this screen was just below your name is a link that says Contact Us. This is where you can find a link to my email. You'll see a picture of me as well as a link to my email. If you ever have questions about Westlaw, how to navigate, how to find something, what does something mean, do we have certain content, you are always more than welcome to email me. I generally have a 24-hour response time unless I'm on vacation, but generally it is much faster than 24 hours, but always give me at least a day. You can log into Westlaw Precision at the top of the screen using the toggle dropdown. I've already logged in. And so here we are on the homepage for Westlaw. One of the top questions that I get about Westlaw as the Westlaw manager is, what is Westlaw? I'm going to click in the middle of the screen where it says content types. Westlaw is essentially a database of databases. I like to think of taking the law library and putting it onto your computer in a searchable format. However, that being said, everything that's in the law library isn't necessarily on Westlaw, and everything that's on Westlaw isn't necessarily in the law library. And that's really one of the biggest points that I want to make today as a researcher. You should know all of the information and resources that you have access to. And that's what I want to empower you with today as we are working through the research path that I'm going to use. So at the top of the screen, I'm going to start by doing two things to stay organized and to help me better conduct research in the future. So the first thing I'm going to do is click where it says folders and then view all. Folders on Westlaw works just like folders in Microsoft Word or Excel or PowerPoint, and this allows you to drop documents into your folders to save them for easy access later. You can see on my screen that I have various folders by projects, by schools, classes, and so I'm going to create a folder and drop documents as I'm researching today, and at the end of class, I'm going to show you what's happened to the folder once I've done. So at the top right, I'm going to click on the little manila folder icon with a plus sign, and I am going to use a common law marriage in Utah example today. Now, I know that you likely have a different topic and a different jurisdiction for your assignment that's coming up, but everything I'm going to show you today can easily be translated to your topic and to your jurisdiction. And so that's one of the things that I want you to keep in mind when you start learning what content you have available, what resources you have. It makes researching a lot easier and a lot more efficient. The next place that I'm going to click on is at the top right next to folders where it says My Links and then Favorites. Favorites saves places on Westlaw. So folders save documents, cases, statutes, articles that I want to go back and read. Favorites saves places. So think of like shortcuts on your desktop or shortcuts in your internet browser toolbar. I'm going to create a group today, and I will also call it Common Law Marriage, Utah. So throughout the class, I will also save places where I've been on Westlaw and also show you how I'm going to use it in the future. So I'm going to go back to the home page. So if I click where it says content types, you can see all of the different content that we have on Westlaw: cases, court documents, practice materials, secondary, statutes, briefs, and so on. We have over 40,000 databases on Westlaw that you essentially have access to. And you'll be using Westlaw not just for legal research and writing, but in the future, if you're on moot court, law review, or the journal, if you're in clinic, working as a research assistant, taking a paper class. So again, learning what content you have makes you a better researcher. And that's what I want to focus on today. But to get started, I'm going to run a search right here at the top of the page to show you what happens. So this is our global toolbar. You can type in a citation, ask a question, look for a database, type in some search terms. You can do anything from this toolbar. So I'm just going to type in common law marriage requirements. You can type in your own search, or you can see the suggested drop downs that Westlaw has made. I'm going to go ahead and stick with mine. Over on the right side where the jurisdictions are, I'm going to untag all states and all federal. I will tag Utah, click save. So this is searching in all of Utah primary law cases and statutes, as well as all the rest of the content on this portion of the directory, everything above specialty areas. So it's a pretty massive search. And so this is an easy way to get started. And again, this is, one of the first steps that you can do to start a project. But if I click over on the top left, you can see all of the different results and all of the different content type where Westlaw found your search terms, because it was running in all of those different pieces of Westlaw. You can see over on the right side of the screen where your search terms appear in bold and highlighted in yellow. So it's an easy place to begin. Again, if you don't know much about the state of Utah or common law marriage or the requirements for common law marriage, it's a good place to get started, but it's not always the most efficient way to do your research. I don't want to always get all of this extra information for your open memo, and in the future, probably for your appellate brief, you'll need cases, maybe a statute or two, and likely some secondary sources. In the future, you may need some of these other materials, but for right now, let's focus on those three big content areas. So I'm going to go back to the home page, and I will click on content types and then on statutes and court rules. I like showing the information from this screen just simply because this is where you can find all of your statutory material all in one place. Your US Code annotated, the Constitution, all of your federal rules, all of your state statutes, other jurisdictions, as well as some statutes organized by topic. I'm going to go ahead and click into Utah. And I am going to save this to my favorites that I just created. In case I want to come back to Utah statutes, I will have it right there at the top of my screen. So as a general rule of thumb, I will tell you that searching in statutes is really much better and more effective by utilizing a natural language search. So I am going to use my same search that I just used a minute ago, common law marriage requirements. Statutes oftentimes don't look like cases, or they don't look like secondary sources, and a lot of times they don't follow the rules of grammar. So using terms and connectors in a statutes database oftentimes doesn't work very well. And so here we have our list of 56 results. I can scan through the documents to see all the titles of the sections that were retrieved by this result. And I'm going to hop into the first one, 81-2-408. And I am going to save this into my folder that I created at the beginning. So my common law marriage Utah folder. So I save statutes into my favorites, and I save this one document into my folder. So this is what I wanted to talk about. So here we have numbers, letters, sometimes it's uppercase, sometimes it's lowercase. Here we have some Roman numerals. Is this a sentence? So we have this whole with some semicolons and colons. So this is one reason that terms and connectors oftentimes don't work well in statutes. It's because a lot of times statutes will look like this, and sometimes even some statutes are just one sentence long. So it's best to usually keep your search simple for statutes. So there are two clicks here that if you have a statute to begin your research that you can do to find additional resources. The first is on the notes of decisions, also known as annotations. Annotations, notes of decisions, are written by the West editors, and because they are reading cases for us, they're essentially attaching cases to the statute that have really discussed, examined, or have interpreted the statute and have told us how they've done so. So if I'm looking through the notes of decision categories, I can see that there's a whole section on elements of an unsolemnized marriage. And so, one, I'm learning something else. I've been saying common law marriage, but I might need to say unsolemnized marriage. Maybe that's a better way to say that in Utah. So that's another part of the research process, is starting to look at the results that are coming up to see different terminology, brainstorm, maybe use these new terms in a case law search or a secondary source search. You'll also see some cases that are attached to these annotations, so you can see how they've discussed the statute, as well as what's called the topic and key number system, which is our classification of the law. You'll start seeing these in statutes, you'll see them in secondary sources, and you will also see them in cases. And I'm going to show you how to use those when we get to cases. And so here I can look through. Here we have Volk v. Vecchi, Richards, White v. Blair. We have some other cases, CalCert, again, Volt v. Vecchi. And I can just kind of go through to see if any of these might be helpful to my research. The next click that you can do is on KeyCite citing references. This will be everything that has cited to the statute that you are looking for or that you need for your research. So this will include cases, regulations, administrative decisions, practice materials, court documents, and secondary sources. So this is also a good click to make. So remember, notes of decisions are just cases, and they're the cases that the West editors have said, Anna, these are really good. I would maybe take a look at these. You can see how they've discussed it. Citing references will be anything that has cited to your statute. So I could look through the cases to see if there might be any here that would be useful. I could go through the list. Also, if you are researching a statute and you're having difficulty understanding the meanings or what you need to do with the statute, looking at secondary sources is a good avenue to go through. Again, these are oftentimes written by experts in that jurisdiction or in that field. So why not pick their brain and see what they've already written about? And they will lead you to the primary law as well. So that's also a good place to begin. I'm going to tag a few of these and drop them into my folder. And I'm going to do the same for some of these cases. Maybe I don't have time right now to look through them, and I don't want to forget them. So I've saved those. So those are two of the clicks that you can do if you have a statute to start your research project with. If you know that there is a statute out there guiding your research, it's always a great avenue to begin, as well as using the notes of decisions and citing references, because the West editors have already attached all of these resources to the statute that have already discussed it. So that's the first way that you can begin. All right, I'm going to go back out to the home page, and I will click back on content types, and then I will click on secondary sources. I also love starting with a secondary source just simply because I'm not an expert in every jurisdiction or in every practice area, but secondary sources are really great because a lot of times they tell the story. They kind of give that explanation that you're not going to necessarily get from a statute or necessarily even from a case. And oftentimes they will lay out everything that you need to do, as well as leading you to the primary sources where they retrieve that information from. So I like to break secondary sources down into kind of three big categories. The first are by general type. And here we have things like the American Law Reports, which is probably one of my favorite databases. It's a national secondary source, so that means it covers federal and state information, as well as just about every practice area. One of the lessons I also want to leave you with today is take some time to plan your research path, kind of like I'm doing right now, and look at the screen to see what's popping up. I could do my search right here and look through all of the American Law Reports, but if I take just one quick second to look at the screen, I can see there's even a smaller volume specifically on family law. So I may not want to search in labor and employment or intellectual property. I know my issue is a family law issue. So go into what I call the database of least resistance, and that is where you think your answer is going to be. And I will add that to my favorites. And now I've really narrowed my universe. I've gone from all those secondary sources on that main page to the American Law Reports, and then even into a specific volume of the American Law Report. So I can still keep my search relatively simple, maybe add unsolemnized or solemnized, anything else I want to include. But because my universe of materials is so small, I can keep my search a little bit broad. I did get 1,357 documents, so that's a little bit on the high end. But one of the reasons I enjoy starting with a secondary source that I think is useful as well for you is that I can tell a lot what the article is going to talk about simply based on the title of the article. And so here I can see validity of common law marriages in American jurisdictions. It's kind of what I'm researching. I can look through the list to see if there's anything else. I could add something to my search if I wanted to. Maybe I want to see over on the left side using this search within results option to see if any of these also talk about insurance. Maybe my husband was in a car accident and I wanted to see one, if his hospital stay was going to be covered by insurance, but also our car was totaled. And so I also need to see if our auto insurance is going to cover it because he was driving under my policy. And so here it dropped my list from 1,200 down to 543 that also reference the word insurance. Now you'll see our new search terms appear highlighted in purple, whereas our original search terms are still highlighted in yellow. As a researcher, I like that because I can see where my secondary term appears related to the original, but also, was it a big part of the discussion of the article, of the case, whatever it is that I'm looking at? Or was it just mentioned once or just a couple of times? Was it 5 times? Was it 10 times? So I can look through the results here to see how that new term appears. And that to me is also what I want to leave you with today is don't feel like you need to find perfection and that you're going to find the answer on the very first search. It might take a couple of searches to get there. And so start in a smaller database and keep your search simple and broad and get into the ballpark. I have 1,300 results here that I started with, and then I can use the search within results not to get anything newer, but just to make my list smaller. And that's what I love about going into specific content as opposed to that big search at the very beginning. I'm going to hop into this article just to show you what it looks like and why I like ALR articles. ALR has an affectionate name. It's usually called Already Done Legal Research. And here you can see, first off, I don't want this to scare you. It's 248 pages. But as I'm scrolling through, I can see that it's linking me to cases in various jurisdictions. I could scroll through to see if there are any from the state of Utah. And there it actually isn't. Well, right there, I think there's another grouping of them. Yep, they're right there. And so this is what I wanted to highlight about ALR. If the article is good, it may link you to some cases in your jurisdiction. I did want to highlight though, sometimes you might find a really good article, but they didn't cite to something from your jurisdiction. Maybe it was only in, Colorado or Nevada or Washington or something. And I don't want you to be discouraged because the article is really good, but the cases aren't from your jurisdiction. When we get into some cases, I'm going to show you how you can use a case that's not from your jurisdiction for your research. So in this case, I did find some Utah statutes, and I am also seeing something here that is piquing my interest. I've now seen this KTB case that was in my annotations earlier in the statute. I think I also saw Kelly v. Kelly and White v. Blair. This is also a good rule of thumb when you are researching, and why I'm searching in different content. And that's to see what other people have cited to. That's another question is when do I know I'm done? How do I feel secure? And to me, the answer is when I've checked various resources and I feel like I've covered my bases, but I'm also finding those same cases that I found cited to over and over again by other people. And so this is just one way to look through other resources, what other people have referenced and talked about. So this is one other reason I also enjoy starting with a secondary source. I'm going to go back to the secondary sources page. The other couple of places under the national ones, I did want to click where it says jurisprudence and encyclopedias. These are also very helpful. The three here that I wanted to point out are AmJur, the American Jurisprudence Second. That's a great national encyclopedia, covers both federal and state, every practice area, multi-volume. Also, Corpus Juris Secundum is a great encyclopedia, again, federal and state, so it's a great one to start. And then my fourth favorite in this list is the database called Causes of Action. It's one of my other favorite databases within secondary sources because it's going to tell you what you need to prove or defend a cause of action. So it's a great resource to get started. But any of those four here are a good place to begin. All right, the next place to consider going into is a state secondary source. So sometimes you might get lucky and find a state jurisdictional secondary source that's also on your topic. Now, I don't know what your open memo jurisdiction is this year. I'm going to click into Utah, but again, whatever one yours is, go ahead and access that jurisdiction when you get your assignment. Every state is different. For example, you'll see Utah only has 12 secondary sources geared to that jurisdiction. Some states, California, New York, Texas, Florida, may have a few dozen or even over 100 secondary sources. So again, look at your jurisdiction. But right off the bat, I can see that there's a Utah practice series and a family law volume. So why wouldn't I access that database? That sounds like a great database for me to access. And so I could do a search here. And again, I can keep my search simple. I might want to try some of my new terminology or add something, but I'm in just the Utah practice and just the Utah family law volume. So it's a relatively small universe of materials. So I can keep my my search pretty broad and hopefully not get too many results. And I didn't. I got 380, but I might want to add something: hospital, car accident, automobile, insurance, anything else, benefits that are important to my research. I'm going to tag a few of these and add these to my folder. So I can see that this article talks specifically about the statute that I was just looking at in the Utah statutes. And so this is going to hopefully give me a breakdown about the validity of marriage not solemnized or solemnized before an unauthorized individual. So there's my statute again. And then it starts breaking the statute down and then also highlighting other statutes that might be helpful, as well as leading me to cases that also reference this discussion within the article itself. And so here I could look through standard of proof. That might be my requirements, my elements, and when does it end? When does it start? What is the relationship? As I go through the article, I can see that it's also referencing those topic and key numbers. I saw those in my notes of decision in my statutes. I can see that it's also referencing some other secondary sources, as well as some encyclopedias, treatises, and practice materials, as well as some law reviews and journals. So this is a great place to begin if you are researching something state specific to see if there is something in your state. I'm going to go back to the Utah practice series, to that main screen, and add this to my favorites. I don't want to forget this one. And I'm going to go back to the main secondary sources screen to talk about the last area, and that is secondary sources by topic or practice area. Again, I'm not sure what your assignment is on, so you could look through here. I could click into family law. I could maybe click into insurance law, perhaps, if that is a crucial issue that I'm researching, and check out all of the secondary sources by practice area. So these are written by people who are experts in these particular fields. So this is also a great place to begin. And there's just under 200. So this is about 10 clicks. So 1 to 20, 21 to 40. Again, take a few minutes to plan and plot out your research and spend some time so that you're not researching in a bunch of places that are irrelevant to what you are looking for. So again, I could just spend a few minutes here looking through all of these titles to see if any of these might be helpful to my research. For the purposes of time, I just wanted to highlight that, and I will go back to the home screen. All right, the last place that I wanted to take you into are cases. So I started with statutes and then I went into secondary sources, and I'm ending with cases. But one of the things that I did want to stress, and as you've noticed, is when I started with a statute, it led me to cases, it led me to secondary sources, and the same thing for secondary sources. It led me to statutes, it led me to cases. It also led me to secondary sources as well. So no matter what content type you start with, you will be led to the other. And I just wanted to stress that there's no right or wrong way to start. We all think differently. We may all be at different points in our research. So don't feel like you have to start with a statute or you have to start with cases. You can start with whatever content type you think is most important to you at that time. So this is where you can find all of your case law all on one page, all feds, all states, federal cases by court and by circuit, cases by state jurisdictions, other jurisdictions, as well as some cases broken down by topic or practice area. I'm going to click into Utah. And I did want to make a point on this screen, and again, really talking about taking your time and not rushing through your research. If I had just gone and pulled my search down right here, I would be searching in Utah state and federal. And I can see here on the screen that I can get even deeper into my case law research. I can go just into state cases or just into Utah federal. And that's also a big lesson. If you don't need federal cases, don't include it in your search. If it's persuasive or helpful in some way, sure, that's fine. But if you know you are researching a specific state issue, don't include it right off the bat because you're just going to get material you can't use and that you're going to have to sift through. So again, remember the database of least research resistance. I know I'm researching a state issue, so I want to search in state cases. I'll add that to my favorites. And already I've narrowed my research down. I've gone from all cases to state to Utah to just Utah state cases. So again, my universe is pretty small. I'm going to use my same search again just to see what I get. I could try some other search terms. And there are my 60 cases. Remember, I saw those when I first researched at the very beginning, but now these are just the cases on my screen. Here we have our common law marriage, our search terms highlighted in yellow and in bold. I could search over on the left side looking for now my secondary terms: insurance, hospital, accident, benefits, anything else that was important about the hypothetical that you're researching, or any cross issues or sub issues. Two other options here that I wanted to show you for filtering your results. If I scroll down on the left side, one of them is date. If you just want cases from the past few years or the past decade, you can add your own date restriction here. Maybe you're getting cases from the early 1900s or the 1920s, and you just want to see cases that are from the past decade or two. You can enter in a date restriction. But in our case, we got 60, so that's not too bad. The other option that I think is also really helpful for you is the reported status, reported versus unreported. You maybe have also called it published versus unpublished. And so if you can only cite to published decisions, you can eliminate those unreported ones right off the bat. So I could just say, I just want to see the reported cases and drop off those unreported ones so that they're not even appearing in my list any longer. And so that's another easy way to drop off cases from your list that you don't want to have to go through. You're reading it and you're like, oh, this is a great case, but I wanted to show you those filters. So adding a search term to your search, adding a date restriction if you're getting cases that are too old, you know the law has changed in the past decade or the past few years and you just want to get current information, and the reported versus unreported option as well. So those are three filters that you could use to add to your search once you have a result. I'm going to hop into White v. Blair. So when you are in a case on Westlaw, there are a few things that you can do here to get started with your research. The first is at the top of your screen. You can read the synopsis, which is a quick summary of the case, including some of the facts, the procedural history, and the holding. You'll also see the West headnotes and the West topic and key number system. The West headnotes are all of the legal issues that were argued and discussed in order in which they appear in the opinion. So it's essentially an outline of the court's discussion in the opinion. So if I wanted to see where any of these were discussed, I would click on the headnote number and it would take me to that part of the opinion where that issue was discussed by the court. I can also annotate my documents as if I was going to copy and paste. And if I let go of my mouse, I can change that. I can add a blue highlight, good for elements of common law marriage, save that. Because I saved White v. Blair into my folders, this highlight and this note already stays on my document in my folder. I don't have to keep saving it over and over. I can also highlight without taking notes if I wanted to do that. Your annotations and your highlights stay on your document until you delete them. If I wanted to delete this highlight, I could just click on it and delete that highlight. I could also go to this note, click edit, and then delete that off if I wanted to do that. So that is how you can annotate and find the parts of the case that you want to take a look at. But let's say I'm looking at White v. Blair and I'm reading this headnote and it's talking about the requisites and essentials for a common law marriage to exist. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, I love this headnote. I want to find every case in Utah that also has this exact same issue discussed. So this is topic 253 for marriage and cohabitation. I could click on requisites and essentials, but I'm specifically looking for common law marriage requisites and essentials. So I could click on this 253, key number 213, and it will auto run a search for me in the Utah database because I'm in a Utah case, looking for other cases that also have that same issue discussed. And look, there's that KTB. I've seen that a couple of times now. Oh, there's Volt v. Vecchi. I've seen that in my secondary source. I've seen these in my notes of decisions. There's White v. Blair. And I can look through Johnson v. Johnson. I've seen that one. And so on. So that is the power of the topic and key number system, because the West editors are already indexing and classifying the cases and breaking them down for you. They're letting you find these cases just by using the topic and key number system. But if you remember when I was in that ALR article and I said, sometimes you might find a great article, but it doesn't necessarily cite to anything from your jurisdiction specifically. Maybe it's a great case from Texas or Colorado, and you're like, well, great, I can't use this, article because it doesn't cite to anything from Utah. So there's nothing in Utah. Wrong. So let's say I found a really good topic and key number or a good case, just like I did with White v. Blair, and I clicked on the topic and key number. Now all I need to do is at the top where it says jurisdiction, click change. And I can change that to Texas or Colorado or California to find all of the cases that talk about marriage and cohabitation and common law marriage in general. And there are the results in those three jurisdictions. And that's the power of the topic and key number system is once you look at those headnotes and you find really the specific issues of law that you like in the case, this allows you to find all the other cases that also have a similar issue discussed in it. And so that's what I love about the topic and key number system. So remember, you saw those in your annotations. I've seen those in articles, either at the top or at the bottom. And of course, you will see them attached to the headnotes in your cases. I'm going to click on history at the top and go back to White v. Blair. There are a couple of clicks at the top of the case that you can also do. The first is on the Table of Authorities tab, right at the top right corner of the case. This is a list of all the documents that were cited by the White v. Blair court. I can see on what page this case was cited, if it was quoted or not, and how much the White v. Blair court discussed this case. So I can see how much it was discussed. I'm going to drop a few of these into my folder. So if you like White v. Blair, these might be some cases you would want to take a look at because White v. Blair relied on them. So these perhaps are some good ones for you to get started with. The next one is just like statutes, and that is from KeyCite citing references. So this will be, remember, cases, secondary materials, court documents. It may also include practice materials as well. I can see what headnotes they have in common. Remember, I liked headnote number 4 and headnote number 8. So I could look through to see which ones also have those same headnote numbers. Again, I can see how much this case discussed White v. Blair, as well as if they quoted it or not. This is also a good place to get some background information from secondary sources. So remember, your each content type will take you to the other. I've also seen my statutes linked in my headnotes, and here we have secondary sources linked as well. So this is a great place to get started. And then the final click at the top is KeyCite cited with. So table of authorities is what White v. Blair cited to. Citing references is what has cited to White v. Blair, but there's kind of a place in between where other cases are cited by another case together with White v. Blair. So I can see that two other cases have cited State v. Green and White v. Blair together. I can scroll through to see why. So here we have, there was statute of limitations. This is talking about divorce, statute of limitations. Again, I can go through to see if any of these might be helpful. I could do a search within those 782: insurance, hospital, car accident, automobile, anything that I'm looking for. So with just a couple of clicks, I already have essentially almost 900 documents to take a look at. And again, this is just one way to start. And again, I stress to try different options so that you can look through the results to see what you're getting. Now, you maybe have also noticed in some of your documents where you've seen the little symbols in the top left. There isn't one in White v. Blair in this example, but in your table of authorities, maybe you saw a yellow flag or a red flag perhaps on a case. So there's a red flag, a yellow flag. That is one of our KeyCite symbols. If I click on the top of the case where it says powered by KeyCite, the legend will pop up. So that's always there for your reference. So a yellow flag on a case indicates that your case has some negative treatment, but nothing that is case killing. So if you see a yellow flag, you can be sure that the case is still valid for what it stands for, but other cases disagreed with it for some reason. You would want to click on the negative treatment tab to see what happened. A red flag would indicate that your case is no longer good law for at least one point of law that it contains. You would want to click on the history tab to see what happened. It doesn't mean don't use this case. It simply means something else has happened that you need to investigate to see, does that impact how you are using the case? A red stripe flag indicates that something outside the direct line has directly impacted your case. And again, I would need to check the history. A blue stripe flag indicates that your case has been appealed to the U.S. Courts of Appeals or to the Supreme Court, and something may happen in the future that you would want to keep track of. And then finally, the orange exclamation point symbol indicates that something in your table of authorities is no longer valid. So you might want to check that to see how that impacted how White v. Blair relied upon it. So those are the symbols. These are the tabs that you can use to get started with your case law research and expand out that way. So just a couple more things, and I'm going to leave some time for questions. I'm going to go into the history. So your history on Westlaw will stay on your password for 1 full year. And so anything that you've done on your research since you've logged in, since you've registered, will be here. This will start to drop off of my password on October 1st, 2026. So I can easily go back to a date that I was researching. I can look through for something I was, remember the case was about. I could look for a keyword that way. Now my folders stay on my password until I delete my folder. So that stays. So anything you create in your folders will stay until you delete it yourself. I love the foldering system on Westlaw for this one thing that just popped up. So I've been dropping things into my folder as we've been going along, and Westlaw has been doing some work for me as I've been dropping things into my folder. And so this is kind of covering my bases. Maybe I didn't look at this Hogsett v. Neal case. It's from Supreme Court of Colorado. So maybe I won't need that. I could easily dismiss that, but here's some secondary sources that might be helpful. And so I like using my folders for that. I also like the fact that I have so many folders. I don't want my family law class information in with my common law marriage research assignment information. If I'm doing something on, a torts issue for negligent infliction of emotional distress, I don't want my torts class information mixed in with that. So you can have as many folders as you want on your password. And again, you can delete them whenever you decide you want to delete it. Just click on the folder that you want to delete, click on the vertical ellipsis, and then you can delete it. And so those are your folders and the research recommendations that start appearing when you are, once you start dropping information into those folders. The final option was the favorites that I created, and I've been saving a few databases into my favorites. I didn't add too many, but remember when I did my search at the very beginning and it pulled up about 11,000 results in briefs, forms, jury verdict, legislative materials, all kinds of content that really wasn't important to me. Now, if I pull down my search and tag my favorites just for my common law marriage project, and if I run my search, it's now just in those 4 content areas: Utah cases, Utah statutes, ALR family law, and then the Utah family law volume in the Utah practice. And again, I could add more if I went through the content types on the homepage. And now instead of 11,000 and a bunch of content that I don't need, I now have roughly about under 2,000 results, about 1,750 or so. And now these I know are my jurisdiction, my topic, and I'm researching in places that I know are important to me, not in all of Westlaw, everything that, is in our directory. I did want to click back and show you just 2 more things in the content. So if you were researching a federal issue, you could go into federal materials right here on the homepage. If you are researching in a particular state, I could go to state materials. So in my example, I would click on Utah, and this is where you could find everything for Utah all in one place. I showed you in the main content area because I like showing you all the content all on, one page: cases, secondary, and statutes, but you could go into state. And then you could also go into practice areas as well, such as family law or insurance or whatever practice area you are researching, and add this information to your favorites, to your password, if you wanted to do that. So those were the things that I wanted to highlight today. I hope it was helpful in giving you kind of a big jump start into the research process. And again, I started with statutes, secondary, then cases, but you saw that each content type can bring you to another. And if you research in all 3 different types, I guarantee you'll be successful in ensuring that you have what you need and to feel confident with the arguments and the writing process to come. So those were the things I was going to show you. I am going to stop the recording